Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release, The First Omen. And I'm going to be honest, right up front, I'm going to tell you, this is a pretty good horror movie for being a late entry in a horror franchise. I mean, most late entries in franchises are just, at best, This one, actually pretty good. So I say give it a shot. Even if you haven't seen any of the other Omen films, you don't really need to have seen any of them. I mean, me personally, I've only seen the original, and that was it. And then I saw this one and enjoyed it. It made perfect sense to me. This film was directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who did Channel Zero, the show, 6 episodes of one of the seasons of Channel Zero, which I know a lot of people like. 1 episode of the show Legion, and 1 episode of Brand New Cherry Flavor, which if you have not watched that show on Netflix, definitely watch it. Very interesting. Now this movie is not on Netflix. This movie is actually on Hulu, so if you have Hulu, you can watch it for free, or you can probably digitally rent it somewhere. Written by Stevenson as well as Tim Smith and Keith Thomas. And Keith Thomas had written the script for the film The Vigil, which I think may also be on Hulu at the moment, and I've heard really good things about, but I just haven't gotten around to seeing it because there's just, so many films to watch. Quick synopsis of the film. If you're familiar with any of the Omen films, you probably don't even need to know this, but it's about a young woman from America who goes to Italy, well, Rome specifically, and she's going to be a part of this convent there because she has kind of been thrown around other places. She was kind of a ward of convents, basically. And so it's kind of what happens when she shows up to this place and she starts seeing that some weird things are basically happening. And they kind of set it up with some very interesting imagery and some off-putting things for the opening sequence to kind of get you in the mood for what you're in for with the film. So I'm just going to leave it there. I would say I recommend it. And these typically aren't my type of films, like The Omen being like about good versus evil in a horror setting, or like possession films, which I'm not saying that's what this is, but like I'm just kind of naming ghost films, subgenres like that. These aren't my types of things. This one falls into one of those categories, and I ended up liking it, though, so that, I think, speaks volumes. The opening sequence goes pretty hard, and it lets you know that they aim to disturb you at times, to scare you, to freak you out, to disturb you at times. They don't approach this with, like, a PG-13 mindset. They're like, we're going to go hard, and we're going to impress, or at least partially impress, the horror fans, the people who are actual fans of the Omen franchise. Because a lot of times they end up, in these later franchise installments, they end up going a little weak on it. And sometimes when they do go harder, it's just they have the gore, they have the violence, but the story sucks. The story's actually pretty good in this as well, so it's a nice balance of things coming together. It looks really good. There are lots of cool shots and nice, smooth camera work used throughout it, so wonderful cinematography. I think the direction with this film is really good. There's a lot of awesome technical stuff going on here. There's one particular shot I found super awesome involving a character and how they're revealed to be surrounded by candles. This doesn't actually ruin anything about the film, but it's a character kind of like kneeling, and then it's slowly panning back and it's showing like some candles, and then it reveals some other candles, and it's kind of how they're encircled by candles when the camera gets far enough back. It's such a well done shot. It's beautiful, and there's a little bit more to it, which, you'll know if you've seen it, or you will know when you see it. So that was cool. The characters are interesting, and the dialogue, I think, is quite well written. It feels very realistic for who these characters are, and these characters have actual depth. You want to know more about them. They're interesting individuals who seem very complicated, and you just feel for some of them, want to know more about others, are repulsed by some of them, and yeah, well, not repulsed, but you don't want to get too close, really. But they're very interesting, and that's one of the best things you can do with a film like this, where it's like, oh, another one in the franchise, probably not going to be great. Give us interesting characters. They do that. Give us dialogue that feels very realistic, so you can create some interesting relationships between these interesting characters. They do that as well. So, all about it. There is a wild birth scene in this film. Very surprised. I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to give anything away, but there is a very wild birth scene in this movie, and I'm not going to say I was shocked because things don't really shock me all that often in film. I was surprised that they took it where they took it. And yeah, I was just like, oh, okay, you know, they've got some cojones here. They actually want to go somewhere with this. All right. There's a scene that's taken directly from the original, but they put a little twist on it. Again, I'm not going to go too far into that because it would get a little bit spoilery about something that does happen. But if you've seen the original Omen, there is a scene that you will probably remember from it. They do that in this film, but they put their own kind of twist to it, which I think is effective. So it's kind of one of those cool things of like giving you a little nostalgia for the first film and a little nod to the first film, but then also saying, but you know, we're doing our own thing here and we're in a way improving on some of that stuff. There's an interesting idea that's thrown out about 50 minutes in, which made me start thinking about how in-depth some of these types of films have actually gotten story-wise. And I feel like they typically, my cat's looking at me, I feel like they typically don't get that in-depth and they don't come up with these super interesting ideas a lot of the time. Again, I'm going to say this a lot, with a late entry in a franchise like this, it's usually more lazy writing. But I think they found a really interesting angle to go with story-wise, and when that concept is revealed at about 50 minutes in, I think it really works super well. So, big fan of that. 1.5 hours in, it really does kick into high gear, which is great because it's close to, no, I think it's a little bit over a 2-hour film, which I do think, you know, it could have been shaved down a little bit, or I think it is about 2 hours. It's like a little bit over about 2 hours. It could have been shaved down a little bit, but actually for the most part, the pacing is pretty decent, and especially when you get an hour and a half in for like that last half hour or so, or a little bit more than half an hour, it's just like, it's like go, 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 go. It's way more interesting. It's way more engaging. They're throwing a lot of like cool things at you. You just feel the intensity a lot more. There's a prolonged scene with about 25 minutes left in the film that goes over the top to the point where it's actually unintentionally funny. It played to me like they were trying to kind of steal a scene from Andrei Zulawski's film Possession in a way, but it wasn't there. Like, they weren't able to actually execute it, and it went on way too long, and it just came off as just like ridiculous, over the top, stupid, which obviously didn't fit in this film because this film is done very seriously, and it's just supposed to be like very like scary and intense, so it just didn't work out. The movie needed to be trimmed down some, but the pacing's pretty good, even though the ending actually ends up being kind of drawn out. The very end sequence of the film, I think they should have cut that down a little bit because it does feel like you're just kind of like, okay, and now we're done. Okay, maybe not. Now we're done. Okay, maybe not. Now we're done? And it just kind of keeps going and going and going. So, yeah. So thematically, though, this won't ruin anything. I think, you know, I'm not saying 100% on this one, but I think there's a point in this film potentially that religion may not be what it seems. And I'm being kind of cryptic about that because if I get too specific, I'm going to end up revealing some things about the film. And I don't want to do that because I do recommend this film. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very solid 3.5 star rating. Thought about going 4, but I don't think it's quite there yet. So 3.5 stars. If I did quarters, I do 3.75. It's a good one. It's one of the good horror films of 2024. So go ahead and check that one out. Comments. Go ahead and put something in the comments if you want to talk about this. If you've seen it, we can do spoilers in the comments. Totally cool. Hit subscribe to my channel if you want to support me for all the free content I'm putting out. Hit a thumbs up on this video and any video you watch, and hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this. I appreciate your time. And until next time, keep it brutal.